Welcome to the Economist in Your Ear podcast. Today, we're asking, when the integrity of America's central bank is tested, how do we truly measure the danger, and what should we really be watching? Recent events highlight in a significant piece from The Economist bring the Federal Reserve's independence into sharp focus, forcing us really to consider if a critical line has been crossed. We're talking about the unprecedented move by Donald Trump to attempt to fire Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook. Now, this isn't just a headline-grabbing event. It represents the first time a president has actually tried to sack a sitting Fed governor on for-cause grounds. And The Economist points out that even if this attempt ultimately fails, well, the mere signal of political pressure on rate decisions can lead to higher term premia. That's, the extra return investors demand for holding longer-term bonds due to perceived risk or uncertainty, which, ironically, could end up tightening financing conditions anyway. So let's unpack this immediate spark. On August 25th, word broke that Trump moved to fire Fed Governor Lisa Cook. The allegation involves misrepresenting primary residence status on past mortgages. Cook, for her part, calls these claims baseless and is preparing to sue to block her removal. While this is an undeniable breach of established norms and clearly signals political pressure, well, what's truly striking is how financial markets, initially at least, didn't seem to panic. Dollar assets only weakened a little bit. Given the dramatic nature of this and the clear signal about potential influence on interest rates, why haven't we seen a more significant market reaction? What are we missing?
That's really the crucial question, isn't it? While this action certainly signals a norm being broken, and yes, there's a risk that term premia could nudge higher, the market's initial calm, I think, is rooted in some pretty robust institutional buffers that are already in place.
Okay.
It's a key distinction, you see, between a political signal and an immediate effective action. Investors aren't in a full-blown panic because the legal and structural hurdles to actually removing a Fed governor are, well, they're substantial.
Okay, substantial how?
Well, for one, Fed governors serve these lengthy 14-year terms, and they can only be removed for cause. That specific phrase is key. Supreme Court precedent, specifically the landmark Humphreys executor case, still strongly shields multi-member independent agencies like the Fed from presidential overreach.
Right, Humphreys. That goes way back.
It does. And even more recent cases like CELA Law and Collins v. Yellen, which did term protections for single director agencies, don't really apply directly to the Fed's multi-member board structure. It's different. Plus, Governor Cook hasn't even been formally charged yet. And a court would ultimately need to determine if these alleged mortgage misstatements actually meet that very stringent for-cause standard.
And that could take time.
Oh, absolutely. Until then, she's likely to remain on the board, potentially for a considerable period while litigation plays out. And even if she were removed, any replacement would still need Senate confirmation. That's a significant hurdle.
Yeah, we saw that play out before.
Exactly. We saw this in Trump's first term with nominees like Judy Shelton and Stephen Moore, who just couldn't clear that hurdle. So these aren't minor roadblocks. They're specifically designed to protect the Fed's independence.
Those legal protections certainly sound formidable on paper, but, for all their strength, are there circumstances where they might prove less effective? Or could a determined executive still find a way around them, maybe slowly?
Well, it's true. The system is designed to be robust, but vigilance is always necessary. There's another layer of protection, too, which comes from the individuals already on the board. Now, one perspective suggests that Chris Waller and Michelle Bowman, who were nominated by Trump in his first term, might be seen as easily influenced.
Because they dissented for a rate cut in July.
Precisely. But, their records also show they acted quite institutionally during that critical 2022 inflation fight. So it's important to distinguish between genuine policy disagreements and, look, there's often a respectable data-driven case for cutting rates depending on the economic conditions and outright political capture. Just because someone disagrees on policy doesn't mean they're captured, right?
That's a fair point. Oversimplifying policy views as just politics can miss that nuance.
Exactly. Furthermore, think about Chairman Powell's position. His term as chair ends in May 2026, but his governor term runs much longer until January 2028.
Ah, okay.
So legally, he could choose to stay on the board as a governor even after his chairmanship ends.
Potentially denying an immediate replacement for that key spot.
Right. And then there's the Federal Open Market Committee, the FOMC itself. It remains a diverse committee. The New York Fed president always gets a vote, and the other regional presidents rotate their voting slots. This structure inherently diffuses power. It makes it incredibly difficult for any single president or even a small group of appointees to just unilaterally control rate decisions in the immediate term.
Mm-hmm.
So that scenario, the superchair dictating policy from behind the Resolute desk, it's a real danger, yes. But it would require multiple institutional buffers to fail, one after the other, for it to happen quickly.
Okay, that helps explain why markets aren't in a full-blown panic right now. That makes sense for short-term stability. These multiple checks and balances seem quite robust, at least in the short term. But that covers the immediate hurdles. What about the longer game? Are there quieter, maybe more subtle mechanisms through which the Fed's independence could still be eroded? Perhaps in a way that, escapes the immediate headlines?
Absolutely. And this, I think, is where our examination shifts from the, let's say, dramatic to the perhaps more insidious. While the immediate drama around Governor Cook grabs all the attention, the real, more durable lever for potentially shifting the Fed's independence isn't just one contested seat on the Board of Governors.
Okay, what is it then?
It's the reappointment process for every single Reserve Bank president.
Yeah.
That comes up for a 5-year renewal at the end of February 2026.
All of them at the same time.
But their 5-year terms tend to align. Now think about it. Local boards nominate these presidents, right? But the Board of Governors in Washington, D.C. must approve them.
I see where you're going.
Right. So imagine a scenario where a White House-aligned board majority achieved, perhaps through a methodical process of nominations and Senate confirmations over time, could then systematically reshape the regional presidents. This approach could quietly, almost imperceptibly, shift the FOMC's center of gravity far more reliably and more durably than a loud, headline-grabbing fight over a single governor like Cook.
That feels much more hidden.
It is. This is where the Fed's independence could erode quietly, by 1,000 small decisions over time, rather than one dramatic, easily identifiable blow. It's a much more subtle, yet potentially powerful, long-term threat.
So it becomes clear then. While the immediate institutional buffers the courts, the Senate explained the market's current relative calm, the bigger medium-term risk is actually this methodical, almost bureaucratic effort. Stacking the board and then reshaping Reserve Bank leadership in 2026. That suggests we need to be watching a different clock and maybe a different set of levers entirely to understand the true trajectory here. Now, it's often argued that greater political influence over the Fed will, over time, lead to higher interest rates. Because of increased risk, right? Investors might demand more compensation, like for holding treasuries, if they doubt the Fed's impartiality. Is that always how it plays out, or is there more nuance?
That's generally true over the long term, yes. It happens via inflation risk and what we call a rising term premium. If the market perceives the Fed is no longer truly independent, it will absolutely demand more compensation for holding long-term debt. That pushes long rates higher.
Okay.
However, in the near term, there's a crucial nuance that portfolio managers and forecasters really need to grasp. A more compliant board, perhaps one less concerned with inflation fighting and more focused on short-term political goals, could actually cut policy rates faster than an independent Fed might.
So short rates could go down.
Exactly. This would pull the short end of the yield curve down, while the 10-year term premium creeps up because of those rising long-term risk perceptions about inflation or maybe fiscal discipline.
Okay.
This is what we call a bear steepening scenario.
Yeah.
Long-term rates rise, even as short-term policy rates might fall. It often indicates market anxiety about the future.
Right, so the yield curve gets steeper, but in a bad way.
Precisely. Understanding this nuance is critical because it's not just a blanket all rates go up scenario immediately. The dynamics are more complex.
That's a really important distinction. It highlights why it's so vital to understand the granular dynamics at play here. So for you, what are the practical tripwires we should be watching to understand how this story evolves beyond just the immediate headlines? What specific signals will tell us if these quieter, maybe more insidious threats are gaining ground?
Okay, yeah, there are several key things to watch closely. First, obviously, the Cook litigation. Pay attention to the injunctions, the venue where the case is heard, and critically, how broadly the courts interpret that for cause standard for removal. That will set a really important precedent.
Okay, the legal battle itself.
Second, Senate math.
Yep.
Can any nominee for a Fed governor position actually clear the committee and get confirmed? A failed confirmation? Well, that preserves the status quo and is a sign the buffers are holding strong.
Makes sense.
Third, recess appointment tactics. If the White House tries to bypass the Senate using recess appointments, watch whether the Senate keeps up those pro forma sessions to block them. The Noel Canning playbook is critical there.
Right, preventing appointments when the Senate isn't technically in recess.
Exactly. Fourth, and this is really the crucial long-term indicator in my view.
Yeah.
The 2026 Reserve Bank reappointments. Watch which regional presidents get renewed and, just as importantly, how the Board of Governors signals its standards and priorities in those approval processes. That's the quiet game changer.
That's the subtle shift you mentioned.
Yes. And finally, number 5, curve dynamics. Keep a close eye on the short end of the yield curve versus the term premium on the long end. If doubts about Fed independence really start to grow, expect that term premium to creep up even if policy rates, the short end, are falling. That divergence tells us a lot about market confidence or lack thereof.
Okay, that's a clear set of indicators to track. So what does this all mean for you, our listener? While the attempt to remove Lisa Cook is an undeniable breach of norms and inherently dangerous to the Fed's credibility, and really the critical norm of central bank independence, the immediate, visible institutional buffers, the law, the courts, the Senate, the FOMC structure itself, and even Chairman Powell's own governor term, these seem to explain the market's current relative calm. These are powerful checks.
And that's really the crucial insight, I think, for you to take away from this exploration. The real danger isn't necessarily this week's dramatic firing letter, as unsettling as it is. It's potentially a much more methodical, quieter effort that could emerge to stack the Board of Governors and then reshape Reserve Bank leadership come 2026. That's where the Fed's independence could erode most durably, perhaps under the radar. And that's the long game we should all be paying attention to. It's not about a single dramatic event necessarily, but a potential slow, steady reorientation that could have profound impacts on the economy and, frankly, your financial future.
Thanks for listening. Follow us to stay updated with the latest insights on The Economist every day. And don't forget to like, comment, and share.